remember Googling if you can get addicted to weed at like 14, because I was like, no one talks about this, but I cannot stop smoking this stuff. And even then Google was like, not really. And by the time I realized what was really going on, it was a little too late.
Welcome to the Sober Spill podcast. I'm your host, Isabel. On this podcast, we have real conversations with people in recovery, their families, and organizations that pertain to this field. Today, I'm here with the host of the clinical side of our podcast, Jana Wu.
Thank you, Isabel. My guests will discuss best clinical practices, new emerging trends in substance use and mental health disorders, and how we can best take care of ourselves and our loved ones in recovery.
See you every Thursday.
And come spill with us soon. Welcome to the Sober Spill. Today we are thrilled to have Jessica Whaley, licensed clinical social worker, doctoral candidate.
Doctoral student. In a year, I'll be able to call myself a candidate. But currently I'm in a Doctor of Social Work program.
Excellent licensed alcohol and drug counselor. And Nate Katz, certified peer recovery advocate -Y.
That's Y provisional.
Y provisional. And what is the Y for?
Youth specialization.
That's excellent. And can you explain what all of those initials mean too?
Yeah, so certified peer recovery advocate. After a training, you become, so you have to be in recovery usually, and you're a peer to those who are going through active addiction. So through lived experience and sharing about yourself, you kind of lead others to become sober themselves and help them out. And, there's no stigma because you've been through it, and there's no hierarchy because you're sharing about yourself, and there's no judgment, and you're always, advocate on their side. So if there's conflicts with family, with work, school, you're always on your peer side.
That's very powerful. Thank you. Well, welcome to the Sober Spill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Why don't we just start with what you guys do at Mountainside?
Huh?
Yeah, so I primarily work out of the Ramsey office for adolescent outpatient services. I see adults as well, and then I also support all three of our state locations in New York and Connecticut with developing programming and overseeing the operations of adolescent services, as well as help support developing school-based services and interventions with Nate in New York City.
Yes. And Jess really carries the adolescent stuff, but I'm excited to work with her on that. I'm a recovery coach, usually in Chelsea, Manhattan, but I travel to Chappaqua and Canaan when need be. And a specialization in adolescents, but I'll work with some older people as well, because really, as a peer, I can share my experience with them, and it's not just clinical, and we're kind of, sometimes they'll share things with me they couldn't share with their parents or someone else, because they know they won't get in trouble, and I'm on their side.
How did you guys get into this work?
For me, it was a matter of age. So I'm in school for my master's in psych and KSAC, but before I graduated, I was able to get the SERPA because that's a more intensive credentialization. And it really spoke to me. I had a lot of friends in addiction growing up. I'm 23 myself and family members in it. And for me, it was kind of close to home, and I was leading a group when I first got sober on my own, and I had no credentials. And then my sponsor told me, what you're doing, there's actually a credential for that where you could get work that's not just on your own. And he put me onto it. And since then, I've kind of loved it. I'm going to school for it as well, but the SERPA was a great way to get into it early and then be able to share about myself as well, because I would have appreciated that a lot when I was in early recovery.
Yeah, and again, the SERPA is the Certified Peer Recovery Advocate.
Yes.
What does it take to get a SERPA then?
So I believe it is a 50-hour, 1-week intensive, and then you need to have 350 hours of clinical supervision, and then you take an exam. And then after the exam, you get it.
Yeah, that's amazing to have that transformation. I want to come back to something later because I am curious that you said that a lot of your friends had struggled too. And I want to definitely come back to that, like what you think it was about either the time and place or if it was gravitating towards people that also struggled. But I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, probably all the above.
Yeah. And Jess, how did you get into it?
Yeah, so similar to like Nate had shared, at this point it's difficult to exist without being touched by addiction to
Mm-hmm.
some degree. Having, family members, I lost my brother to an overdose when I was pretty young, and right, like you don't get out of adolescence unscathed. And so really being able to kind of look at my own experiences as a teenager and what the support I received looked like, really wanting to kind of carry that into my professional life and give back a little.
Yeah, that is a lot. How old were you then when you lost your brother?
I was 17.
That's, yeah, a really tender age.
Yeah, it was tough. He wasn't living with us at the time,
Mm-hmm.
so I think that separation made it a little more challenging to experience that grief as well. Because he was living in Nevada at the time that he had passed away. So kind of having that distance, and then all of a sudden he's not here. It impacts you, right? We see grief impact everybody. But at that kind of pivotal young age, it really shifted the direction that I was handling things. And so being able to get support as a teenager throughout that was really impactful.
Definitely. And I'm appreciate you sharing that, because I think those are some of the voices that we see often in treatments. The siblings haven't had a space to share and share their experiences of what it's been like to see their parents in fear, to have their own fears, their own, anger and frustration. But I think there's a lot of need, for the siblings particularly, to have that space. What do you think, back to you, Nate, like, what do you think draws kids, certain kids that struggle more than others with substances? We know substance use in general and experimentation has traditionally sometimes been a part of adolescence for many people in many generations. That exploration, that wanting to feel different, that wanting to change your mind. But why do you think some kids get more caught than other kids, where it goes from experimentation to like misuse or possibly addiction or dependence?
Yeah, I mean, I know for me, and I think a lot of the friends that were going through the same thing, we were all kind of anxious and awkward in middle school. And then by the time you're getting to high school, I remember a big bond. I was selling weed at the time, and girls were into it, the guys were into it, everyone wanted to be nice for drugs. It was kind of a group bonding thing you could always do. You don't really need a plan. The plan would be, oh, let's go use together. And it starts as weed, and then eventually some people are able to keep it to Fridays, but me and my friends were kind of like, oh, this is so great. Let's do it every day and every hour and every morning. And then eventually our tolerance is built. And I was like, well, what can we do? The weed's not really hitting the same way. And then, Xanax was my first harder drug, and got into that. And then, opioids followed soon after. And it's really so accessible. I have little brothers now who, I think I scared them away from all of that, but they both know where they can get hard drugs at any time. And now with how legal weed is, it's in every store. Kratom's in every store.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, it's very accessible. It's very different than when I grew up, like in the 90s. The access really shifts, I think, our public perception too. If something is legal and safe, I think that translates, I think, into a whole different cultural like stance, towards something. But I am curious, like, you were young then and you're smoking, like you said, kind of all day. Did people notice? Did teachers notice? Did your family notice?
yeah, so everyone noticed. And I remember my mom, she did the right thing at the time. She was like, I'm not going to give you money for food if you're going to buy drugs with it. Which even in 8th grade, I was like, that's pretty reasonable. So I started selling to support my habit. And then teachers were also noticing because I'd always been a good student, but then I was getting, searched in school and into trouble. And I guess I kind of liked that attention back then. I'm from a family I have 3 brothers. So we're a big family. And it was nice getting attention from the parents when I guess I'd always been, they say, the perfect child.
Were you the oldest?
I was the second oldest.
Second, mm-hmm.
But my older brother had some high school struggles. But so you're getting attention there, and then from the teachers, and then, usually I think a lot of people would get in trouble from a teacher and not like that. But all my peers kind of thought that was cool, which led me to believe it was kind of cool myself. And there were also times where I knew I remember Googling if you can get addicted to weed at like 14. Because I was like, no one talks about this, but I could not stop smoking this stuff. And even then, Google was like, not really. And by the time I realized what was really going on, it was a little too late.
Yeah, and now, I mean, there was a study published just last month about how we see the rates of cannabis have exceeded the rates of alcohol for 12 to 17-year-olds. So it's interesting to see with that, the legalization, the access, the cultural shifts and perception of safety around substances. What do you think you were looking for in smoking every day, besides the fact maybe the potency and you might have been physically addicted, but what were you looking for?
Definitely relief. Like I was super anxious. I would do something. I'd smoke the weed the day before, and not do a homework assignment, and then get in trouble. And then I'd wake up sober and be like, "Oh my God, what did I do? That's so stupid. That's so unlike me." And I'd want an escape from that. Uh, I'd have like real bouts of depression, where it's like, all right, I don't want to get out of bed, but I can definitely smoke weed. And then once I started, I'd never fallen behind in school before. So then once I'm falling behind in school, it kind of became a little cyclical where, oh, I feel really bad about where I'm at in school now. I'm kind of going to become this character. That's not so true to me. And so definitely that spiral of like anxiety leading to smoking and then feeling bad about it and not wanting to do anything. And that kind of paralyzed me.
Yeah, Jess, does this sound like, how does this sound to you clinically? Are you seeing this type of presentation? And
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Nate, you said something that kind of really struck me of, well, then I'll kind of take on this character that's not really me. I feel like I see that pretty often of, right, especially in adolescence, we're still kind of figuring out who we are, how we're thinking, what we want, and living in very extreme ends of everything. And so it's really hard to kind of recognize I don't have to become this character, but when our anxiety, when our thought is skewed and everything's kind of, coming in, right? Like our world feels so big and scary. It does feel kind of like this is our only option of, well, I might as well just become this thing because then it feels easier than having to kind of deal with the waking up of, oh, I can't believe I didn't do that. I think a lot of aspects that I see too is this desire for a sense of autonomy as well. There's a lot of things that adolescents can't control or really have a say in during this kind of time period of their life, and substances tend to be the thing of, well, I get to do this. Well, I'm doing this. Everybody's saying no, but I'm, this is something that I have control over. And it gets, gray when you start to realize maybe I don't actually have as much control over it as I thought.
well, I think too, like you're saying, I love that you said like the girls thought it was cool, the guys thought it was cool. It can give people that sense of place too. So autonomy, but also a sense of place and an identity. I think for a lot, for a lot of history, like drug use, it's exciting. Like people are attracted sometimes to that excitement and the thought of it being somewhat counterculture or counter what you're supposed to do, which that really fits into adolescence too, of like trying out different parts of yourselves, different aspects of your personality. I think too, you mentioned anxiety. And I just want to read this so I don't get it wrong, but anxiety disorders affect 16% of US teens, and that makes it the most common diagnosis for teenagers, which you and I were talking about how I had expected it to be ADHD.
ADHD for sure.
Yeah, but anxiety is what we're seeing, and then depression, and then ADHD. At least that's what this recent study has shown us, which I can tag in the comments. But what do you make of that? Like, because I think I see that a lot, and a lot of the adults I work with, particularly around kratom, but this generation, as we know, is often referred to as like the anxious generation. What do you guys make of that?
Well, I think a lot of times too, right, we were talking about accessibility in terms of substances, but accessibility in terms of everything now.
Yeah.
Right, like our third space is no longer the movies or the park, it's the internet, it's social media. And I think when, our world has expanded to anywhere in the world now, it creates very unrealistic expectations for ourselves, unrealistic pressures, unrealistic standards, this thought of all these people are like this, why aren't I? And I think that, combined with we're seeing a lot of like pressure to succeed and like pressure from families and parents and, you know, just wanting their kids to do well. I think all of that combined definitely starts to kind of spike the anxiety and takes away from a teen's ability to kind of mess up a little bit and see how it goes and rolls with it. Now there's way more expectations on you can't do that.
And way more eyes on you. I mean, I think we talk a lot about that. Like when I was growing up, everything wasn't recorded.
Yeah.
And now we know everywhere we go, we are recorded. So it's hard to have that spontaneity and, like you said, try on different identities and try things and fail safely without knowing that it might come back to haunt you, that it might be recorded somewhere.
That your entire school and the school next to you saw it on Snapchat.
It's a lot of pressure.
It's tough.
I hear often from parents, like, you know, they're so worried about their child's anxiety. And usually the first step is they go towards like he needs, like we need a psychiatrist and we need individual therapy. And in my experience, there's a lot of resistance towards group therapy for adolescents or teens. Have you guys seen that, or what do you make of that?
I've definitely seen it and experienced it myself. I remember being like, well, I'm not a junkie. Like, there's nothing wrong with me. I don't need to be with these crazy. Because I think everyone thinks the person in the room is going to be, you know, super crazy and had a lifelong of horrible experiences. And I see that all the time where people are like, well, I just wouldn't resonate with people with those problems because maybe they're in denial themselves. And it is kind of accepting that something's wrong if you're going and seeking help.
True.
And sometimes that's a little embarrassing. Especially if you hadn't needed it before, and now you're saying, I kind of need extra support.
Yeah. Jess, what do you say to parents that really are like, why would my kid want to go to or need a group?
Yeah, well, I think Nate hit the nail on the head of it's extra support. That's really what it is. I think we're still struggling with kind of breaking the stigma on formal substance use treatment. And it still feels like, well, if somebody goes to treatment, then they're labeled with this lifelong problem, right? This label. But I think the reframing of, right, the same way we reach out to our friends when we need extra help. You know, teens don't always know how to navigate that. And all it is just extra support and building that sense of connection with other people who kind of are going through the same thing. I think we see it easier with adults because there's a lot of different like peer recovery programs that they can get connected to, whereas teens don't really have that.
Yeah, there's not that much. There really isn't.
And so being able to have a group and reframe it as, I'm not putting this label on my child, but I'm instead offering them a community of a different way of thinking, right? Something that might support their need right now.
Yeah. I mean, I even sometimes, when I'm speaking to parents or mothers about it, and they're saying, well, I want him to do this, that, or the third, I'll ask to speak with their child first, because most of the time, you know, similar to what I was experiencing, you know, they know something's wrong and don't want to admit it. So, and like we were saying, a lot of younger people, adolescents, like that autonomy and don't want to be anything I'm told to do. I get a little oppositional. So if you could also frame it as their choice of like, hey, are you wanting to smoke a little bit less weed than you're currently smoking? Or school's a little frustrating right now. This will help. Don't you want that? And then when they make the decision, obviously their parents were already on board. But they still have that sense of, I'm doing this. I'm not being made to do it by my parents.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I think. Yeah, Jess, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, I think that's an avenue where on the projects that Nate and I work together on, we work together really well because we both take that approach of, okay, well, this might be a parent seeking services for their teen, but we want to talk to the teen. We want to get to know them. If they're the person we're working with, we want them to feel like they have a voice and they have a say and they're making this decision and they really do have a say in what this looks like for them rather than have it be another adult kind of making a decision for them.
Absolutely. And I think one aspect we see a lot on both sides, for lack of a better term, when I'm working with families, which for me tends to be mostly adults, I've brought in their kids often, as young as like 7 or 8, just so they could see what treatment is. And most often the kids will tell me like, wow, this isn't as scary as I thought. Like I thought it'd be a bunch of like old guys smoking outside. It looks like a classroom. It's not so bad. And then they know where their mom or dad's been going for 3 hours. And I think it's helpful for them to understand even what family therapy is and have that experience of it doesn't have to be scary or intrusive. And so I see that on that end. But then I also sometimes see some parents, I don't want to say have an aversion, but they don't see sometimes the need for themselves to step in and do some of the therapy work with concurrently with their kid. They think, well, they're going to you guys, like you're the experts, you know. How do you manage that and invite the family in, and do you find that helpful?
I mean, I think it's necessary. I wouldn't be sober myself if my mom hadn't switched careers from book publishing to working in the healthcare field. But and it's one of my biggest pitches to, the adolescents I speak with of like, hey, I'm on your side. You're telling me your parents are crazy. I believe you. Like, let's get them some support too. And now you don't need extra support. Everyone kind of needs some support. And that's all right. We're going to deal with whatever's going on because addiction is a family disease. And more often than not, it could be from whatever dynamics are going on at home. If you're expected to be too perfect, if there's not enough attention on you, that could really lead to more use. And it's always good for everyone to be educated on what it is, the best things for everyone to do. Because at the end of the day, I could work with an adolescent on everything, but if they're going home to the same environment, it's a little bit harder for them to take what they've learned with me back home.
Yeah, absolutely. I think exactly like Nate said, addiction is a family disease, right? And so when we look at the way that substance use affects a person, it's never just that one person. Mm-hmm. So why would we work to heal only the one person, right? It touches on everything. And so making sure that if we're looking to provide more support, then the supports are educated and that they also know that they have a space where this affected them and they can kind of heal and work on it so that the family as a whole can get well.
What do you guys think about bringing in younger siblings or even older siblings into the family sessions?
I, as someone with 3 brothers, think it's really important. I know at one point when I didn't care if I lived or died, it was only my little brothers who were like, you're gonna die. And they were like pretty young. And I, took it to heart. And it was a good external motivator before I found internal motivation myself. And it's really important for them to learn. And then I think it also helps. And sometimes, if the client is embarrassed and we're kind of keeping them out of it, we're enforcing that narrative that there's something to be shameful about. And kind of like what you're saying you do with families. When you bring everyone in, it takes away the stigma and it kind of becomes something everyone could work on together and really helps. And then you're fully supported.
Yeah, I love siblings in family sessions. It's such a different relationship. I look at I know I said I lost my older brother. I have another older brother, and we were so close. And my relationship with him, my entire life has always been different than my relationship with my parents. And so being able to, bring in those types of relationships, you get often a space where the sibling, you guys know, right? You know what's going on with each other, but you don't always know how to say it. And you don't always know if you can say it.
Yeah.
And so being able to bring in that perspective, I think also helps make it feel more cohesive for the person who's struggling too, that it's not just parents coming down on them and parents being parents, it gives that insight of, this is really affecting my relationships and people genuinely care about my well-being outside of what I should and shouldn't do, right? Like seeing how your sibling feels is really important.
It is. How do you think siblings can be best supported? Bringing them into therapy, but are there other ways, because I'm thinking now if parents are listening and they're worried about that other sibling that might not be getting as much time, attention, and resources sometimes, how can they support and check in with the other kids?
Well, I think when we look at kind of family work, I think a lot of times it is really focused on the parents, and recognizing that family work can just be for siblings too, right? Making sure that, like I had said before, we're looking at the whole family and the health of the whole family, and substance use touches all of it. And so it's not inappropriate to find community supports for the siblings too. In addiction work, we talk about, peer support programs a lot, but there's also those family peer support programs too. And we talk about maybe getting parents therapists as well, but, the siblings can always benefit from someone to talk to, or even, I don't want to say removing the parents completely, but I've definitely done like sessions where it's just been siblings, right? Making sure that they kind of have this special space for each other too.
Sure. Oh, I totally agree. Everyone should be able to have, if it's a therapist, a clinician, someone to speak to, that extra attention. And then also I hear a lot of people like that they won't talk about it outside of the setting of you're with your recovery coach or your clinician. And that's another thing that kind of adds, or they won't want to talk about it with, family, friends, and it's kind of this big secret. And that I'm always recommending, like, talk about it. Like you're saying, you're not, you're,
He shouldn't be embarrassed.
Yeah, he shouldn't be embarrassed and he's going through it, but you guys, he's seeing you not talk about it with your friends and not talk about it with, extended family. And that's kind of saying the opposite.
I'm really glad you brought that up. That's actually a really common scenario. I've actually had this a lot where a parent will say, like, we're having a family reunion. These are cousins we don't see frequently. Should we tell them that, so-and-so is in treatment right now? And I think that's a really interesting perspective of, if we hold it close, I think it does potentially can keep this, like, the stigma, the shame, and the secrecy going. Of course, if someone's not comfortable with their family knowing, I feel like that's a different thing, but maybe I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think it's up to the person. Because if someone's not comfortable, you don't need to air out their dirty laundry. But I mean, I've had a client relapse because they were at a family gathering and the matriarch of the family offered them a drink and the parents kind of froze and didn't say anything. And they took the drink and drank it because, and that could have been avoided had they come in and said, oh, we're really proud of, our child. They're doing this treatment program right now. Isn't that great? And kind of celebrate it. And then everyone would be kind of cautious about it instead of an instance like that.
Yeah. What do you think, Jess?
Yeah, I like that, like being able to kind of celebrate it if we include more people. I think also, I really do agree with the idea of, we don't want to perpetuate the stigma, so why do we kind of let shame live with the family then? And so, having siblings and being able to talk about with their friends, and I think the misconception is when we share these details, we have to share all the details.
That's huge.
We can just let people in, let people know what's going on and leave it at that. We don't have to know that I crashed my car 2 weeks ago and, all of this stuff. It can just be like, hey, like, I struggled with substances and I'm really trying to stay away right now. And, this is how it's been going. And when we let people in, we find that our community just grows and grows and those connections build. And that's the stuff that really, creates like this breadth of recovery throughout life, as opposed to it being isolated within a family unit.
Hi everyone, Pat McCarthy here. Managing withdrawal symptoms no longer means leaving home. Mountainside's new outpatient withdrawal program provides confidential professional support with daily check-ins from our psychiatric and clinical team. It's designed for your busy life, so you could heal without disruption. Find out more at mountainside.com.
Yeah, that is such a good point, is you don't have to tell it all. You don't have to tell the whole story. And a lot of people that struggle with addiction don't tend to be moderate people. So I think you're right, even having that thought of like, hey, what do you feel comfortable sharing and in what words? And it doesn't, like you said, have to be the whole story and all your details. That's a really good, I think, recommendation for people that are thinking about that. Like, how do we bring this out to our communities? Because I think, like, when we first started, all of us acknowledge, I think, that it's hard to meet someone that hasn't been touched by addiction, either that someone that you love or someone in your own family or like a close friend. I don't think we could think of anyone that, or I know of anyone that hasn't been deeply touched, but yet there still is a lot of shame. And I think especially for parents, most parents come back to feeling like, I'm a bad parent. I did something wrong. If I had intervened when he was 8 and had ADHD, if I had send him to wilderness, if I had, there's all of those reflections that people think if they had done it differently, when we know we typically do the best we can in the moment with the tools and the skill set we have. But how do we help parents move out of that shame space?
I know I speak to parents almost as much as I'll speak to my clients sometimes to help them out with it. I think, like you were saying, the peer support for family members with a loved one in addiction as well is really helpful. And just going to groups. I mean, we at Mountainside have it, but other places as well. There's family programming specifically to one just educate about what addiction is and then learn how to deal with it. Where they're always leading with love, but what boundaries need to be set, and how to act when certain things come around. I think is really important.
Absolutely. I think also a lot of times it's really easy for parents to see their teen struggle with something and think they're the ones who did it or caused it. And I think, I really do believe kind of moving away from that black and white thinking, right? Like you can be a really good parent and have a lot of love for your teen and try to instill all the best qualities. And a teen can still struggle with things because that's adolescence, I will say being a teenager is hard.
Yeah.
Right? Everything's changing constantly. And it doesn't mean that parents failed. It doesn't mean that it was their fault, that they did something wrong, right? That like if I just intervened when they were 8, things would be different. But it's a recognition of staying away from that black and white thinking and recognizing, okay, well, how do I just work with the moment right now? Right? Because we can't go back in time, but we can create a foundation to move forward with better support for everybody.
How long does treatment typically last? Like when people are listening to this, I think sometimes they're like, well, how long is this? Is this years? Is this months? Or
That's a good question.
Yeah.
It really depends. I think we say level of care, as you know, in treatment centers. And I have a lot of people who will come in and it'll be an 8 to 10 week program of outpatient, which is, once a week, an hour and a half a week. And then, I think that's enough for some people. And then I think once someone needs to go to residential, I know a residential stay can be, 5 to 6 weeks. And then after that, there's intensive outpatient, which is another 8 to 10 weeks. And then you drop down to outpatient, which would be another course of 8 weeks. And I mean, as someone in recovery, we kind of say for life. So obviously that's not treatment going to groups and but especially with recovery coaching, it's like I'll take you in different phases. If you're coming in and you're using all the time and maybe we need residential, that's different. But I like to think I have some clients who don't think about me as treatment because they've had some time of sobriety and we're not talking about like, oh, what are we going to do about your positive drug tests and getting you sober and your parents off your back. Like, it could be more, oh, you have basketball tryouts coming out. Let's go play basketball. And I guess that's under the umbrella of treatment, but it kind of looks different.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of times too, when we talk about formal treatment, we really do touch on those levels of care and we look at it as, okay, you're in residential or intensive outpatient, things like that. Something that I really try to stress though is really truly kind of just seeing where you're at when the time comes. I think it can be really easy to get caught up in, well, I was only supposed to be in IOP for 5 weeks and why is it 8? But looking at, right, what's happening in your life. You have basketball tryouts coming up. You feel a little shaky because this is going to be a new team for you. You don't know what their social life looks like. How do we strengthen your support to get you there? And it could look like, okay, maybe we add a couple weeks or we add another session, right? And looking at what the person really needs to kind of meet their goals. rather than get caught up in, "Oh, I'm going to be in formal treatment for X amount of time," and look at it as this countdown until I'm done. Because exactly like Nate said, right? Well, formal traditional treatment isn't going to be forever. We hope that recovery, right? And that sense of change in your substance use is. And so I think destigmatizing the like timeline on formal treatment and just recognizing that like this is a support that I can really maneuver in the way that I need to better my life.
Yeah, I think like you mentioned IOPs, that's intensive outpatient. And I always remind anyone in any level of care, like this is so temporary. It is such a temporary part of your life. You will not be in treatment, like you said, forever.
Yeah.
It's very unlikely that you'll be in treatment for the rest of your life. So just knowing that there is always an end. You know, I think especially like in some of our levels of care where it's more acute, you know, the goal isn't to forever be I was going to say like peeing in a cup, but the goal isn't forever to be like doing urine screens and like, you know, having such intense treatment. The goal is to like have life get bigger. Not that treatment's a bad thing, but that life gets bigger.
Yeah.
What do you say to some families, you know, are like, oh my God, if they, you know, do I have to stop drinking? I mean, I hear that a lot. Like, what do you guys say to families that say that?
I think it's I look at it more as a family conversation of I don't want to give a hard yes or no, right? Because something that I really stress and talk about with my clients and the people I work with is being able to manage recovery without all the red tape around you. You know, when we go through these levels of care and treatment, structure is really high and then it slowly decreases. And exactly like you said, right? Your life gets bigger, your life gets more supportive. And so being able to fill your life while treatment decreases. And so going back to, right, like as a parent, do I have to stop drinking? We would talk about it with your loved one. See what that looks like. Check in to see where everybody is at in this recovery journey. Does this person feel like supported or grounded enough in their recovery where like those kind of training wheels can come off and it can be in the household and they can feel okay and feel comfortable coming to you if like maybe there's a moment they don't feel okay. But I really encourage that to be a family conversation rather than a prescription.
What do you think, Nate?
I agree. For me, it can also change. I think
Yep.
when I have someone in super early, let's say they're checking out of residential
Yeah.
tomorrow, maybe it's a good idea to just have a dry household. But now it's a year later. I don't know if, and you know, this person's been outside. They've been to parties, bars. It's maybe not necessary to have, you know, no alcohol in the household at all. And I like Jess is saying, always a conversation, but it also, and that conversation can change. Like, you know, everyone does. So maybe
Yep.
early recovery, it's obviously good to have more barriers to use the earlier on. But as someone's living their life and kind of things are becoming a little bit more normal and it's less emergency time, I think absolutely, whatever.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice that both can be true. Like right now might not be the right time, but it doesn't have to be forever. But involving the family and having it really transparent. I think sometimes people in early recovery are still trying to manage expectations, people pleasing, and feeling like, you know, I don't want anyone to have to change their life for me because I've seen that happen a lot. Like, no, I want you guys to keep alcohol in the house, drink your glass of wine because you shouldn't have to change your whole lifestyle for me. And then the argument sometimes will come, well, and there's alcohol everywhere. I'll be going to college. There's going to be alcohol there. So both can be true. And maybe for right now, we won't have it in the house. And yes, you'll be exposed to alcohol for the rest of your life. Like, both are true. How do you handle when a younger person says to you, like, how am I not going to drink for the rest of my life? How am I going to go to college and not drink?
I look at it as it might be kind of a silly response, but you know, my first kind of thought is always, well, where are we at with that? Are you a sophomore in high school right now and you're worried about what drinking's going to look like in college 2 years from now? Well, we're not in college right now, you know, and we're not going to college in the next couple months. So I always try to like ground back to where are we at right now? Where are our feet? And kind of take it in stride and see what we can do to support recovery right now, rather than get really caught up in that like future tripping and how are we going to feel when these very big like life milestones happen. Because if it's a sophomore in high school, right, they're going to college in 2 years, they may feel very different about their recovery and substance use 2 years from now. So I always try to invite in, curiosity for checking in with yourself and how you change throughout this time frame, as opposed to just really like getting caught up in that future spiral.
Yeah. 100%. I think anyone, I mean, even in AA, that's why they say one day at a time. People that have, 30 plus years of recovery, of let's look at where we're at now. You have finals coming up. We can agree you don't want to smoke during finals. And then after finals, we can revisit it. And also with adolescents, much more common because I'm not clinical. There's a lot of harm reduction done. So I'll have, it is hard. I got into treatment the first time at 16, but I didn't get sober until 20.
What did you think of that? Like when you're 16, what were your thoughts about treatment?
I probably thought, what about college? What about, I liked using drugs. I thought it was a little ridiculous and unrealistic because I didn't have like sober people in my life. I was like, I don't know anyone who's been sober their entire life. I had a little bad stint, but I'll be able to smoke on Fridays. That's always what I hear. I want to smoke on Fridays and Saturdays. And, I think it's worth trying for a lot of it. Didn't work for me.
But you had to show yourself.
No one was going to tell me that wasn't going to work for me. And I do know people that, were doing fentanyl and now will smoke weed on Fridays and Saturdays and they're perfectly happy and did kind of change their relationship. I think that's how it's different when you're, younger and you're aging and circumstances and environments change. So I don't really tell anyone they never can drink again.
I think that's one thing we see, like with every generation, substances tend to get like more dangerous. And right now we're in a global economy. We know many substances that come in to the States are from Mexico, from China, from other countries, and a lot of semi-synthetics or lab-made substances are coming in, which are really dangerous. How do you sort of navigate that with clients? Because I think harm reduction is really important. And actually, we should probably even, before we get into that question, define harm reduction. What is harm reduction for both of you guys? How would you describe it?
I look at harm reduction as a change in use to really kind of support whatever like healthier lifestyle goals. I look at things really from a use, misuse, and abuse standpoint and kind of assess risk for yourself at that point. And also, how's it impacting you? Because the risk substance-wise might be low, but it's massively impacting. Can you get your homework done? Can you show up for school? Look at things like that. And then how do we want to make a change without taking this hard abstinence approach? You can't do anything forever. Because sometimes that can be really scary and turns a lot of people off. So I look at it from what is going on, how is this affecting you, and what change could happen to make your life better.
Absolutely. I think that's perfect. Because I also see a lot of people, I'll say, harm reduction too, and their first thought is like, so they'll have Narcan when they're using hard drugs. And even though that's a form of harm reduction, technically, it's definitely not the type I'm trying to, lead. And it's like what you're saying. All right, they don't, a parent will be frustrated. And it's like, well, your child's frustrated too. They want to be able to do their homework, be on their sports team, hang out with friends, have a good relationship with everyone in the family. But right now, this is getting in the way. Is there a middle ground? And usually through, setting small, achievable goals. And when they're reached, you kind of get your control back and your life back in a way that's less dangerous, I think.
Yeah. I think we see this a lot with marijuana and like cannabis in general as well, of the difference between like, I don't know how else to describe this, smoking actual weed and then smoking these carts.
Yeah.
Talk about smoking these carts. Like, what is that for parents that might not know what you're referencing?
Like a weed vape. I don't know.
Vapes,
Yeah,
cartridges.
I don't know how else to describe it.
I mean, it's a higher concept of weed,
Yes.
20 to 30% THC. These cartridges, although there's no federal regulation, so we don't know if this is what they actually are. they're allegedly, 80 to 90% THC.
And many that have been tested and said that, they're like toxin-free, organic, have been found to have highly toxic chemicals that are not meant for human consumption. So I think that's what's concerning is I've had so many people be like, oh my God, no, this is organic. But we don't, like you said, the potency is really variable. And there's not a lot of regulation over what's actually in them. And then we were talking about before, a lot of them don't smell.
They don't smell.
And you can use them, you're not supposed to, use them in buildings, but many people use them indoors, which has increased use because it's not like when I was growing up where there was a strong scent to it. You actually had to light a fire, It's very different, I think, for a lot of parents.
Yeah. And I think there's less barriers to use. So here's instead of having to, you have your weed and you grind it and you roll, oh, it's kind of cold outside. Well, I'm going to go outside to smoke anyway and people are going to smell me. That's kind of like 3 barriers to use.
Yeah.
When you have a cart, you're in your room and no one will know. And best case scenario, it's 3 to 4 times more potent than the weed you're saying. Worst case, there's some chemical in there that'll give you God knows what.
Well, I know a lot of people have reported getting sick from it, and we're finding that sometimes it's not the cannabis that they're getting sick from; it's actually the other fillers and toxins in there. And because it can become very reflective, I think we know from back even from Freud, like oral fixations in hand to mouth. And if someone's struggling with anxiety, I've seen it can become really easy just to you keep on going.
Yeah. So that's a good example of harm reduction, where I think we've shared clients who talk about I have the weed vape and they can get away with it a little bit more. And the first thing I rep before saying, I need you to get sober, I need you to, maybe we switch to flower and we'll pick a time. And that alone will be harder because they don't want to go through all the effort of getting weed and then rolling it up and then having to deal with their parents yell at them. And you can see the levels go down as well because what THC they are getting is less potent.
Yeah, it also creates that additional barrier too of a lot of times I hear of, well, it's legal now. Teens are still underage.
Very good point.
They're still underage, and so that switch from cards from their friends to now okay, well, what if we try smoking actual weed? We have a little bit more regulation on it. Now they have to try to have that conversation with their parents. Can you go to a dispensary? And for the record, I'm not advocating that parents go buy their children weed.
No, it's a very nuanced conversation, but I think it's important to break this down. Yeah, that it's not, that these are nuanced conversations. Yeah,
and ones that should be had.
Yeah.
I'm, as you, not advocating it, but I've had parents who are worried where the weed is coming from, where the concentrates are coming, and then coming from. And it's a good conversation for, the kids to have with their parents. All right, now we're being honest. You know how much they're smoking. You know when. And you know where it's coming from. And those were 3 points of contention. And now it's out there.
Yeah, I think that's really what it is. Right now it's out there. Because it breaks down the teens know they're doing something wrong. And now they're hiding it. And now if it's communicating it and having this kind of awkward conversation, right, of having to go to your parents and ask for this thing and feels awkward, but it breaks that down. It's like you said, out in the open now, which kind of creates that that dynamic of it's okay to be vulnerable. So now if things do become hard, it's not something that you now have to admit to, spill the beans on and then ask for help. Right? Everybody's already in the conversation of what's happening.
And we're acknowledging what's happening.
Yeah.
I think that's sometimes what's different about the parenting. Right now we're talking about acknowledging what's already in the room, acknowledging what already exists. They're already smoking weed. Let's talk about it. Versus ignoring it and not talking about the reality, not talking about what we want, but talking about where we are.
Exactly.
It's really important. I do want to ask what kind of substances you guys are seeing. We talked a lot about cannabis. We talked about alcohol. What else are you seeing?
I know I'm seeing, especially having little brothers and friends still in college, a lot of Adderall is being passed. So one kid will be prescribed Adderall and won't use it every day, and they're selling it for a crazy markup. And people are snorting it.
Yes.
Which, I saw, seeing for the first time was kind of weird because you're like, so you're not even pretending it's not a drug.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, so you're snorting it too. It's a little aggressive.
Concerta too, right? If it's not the extended release waxy one, and these are all things you can talk to your prescriber about. I like ADD if you're looking for an ADD med or an ADHD med. First of all, there are ones that are stimulant based. And then there are some that they're purposely made so they can't be crushed up and snorted with like a more waxy.
Yeah, when I say
composition.
Adderall, I
Yeah.
mean, I know there's Vyvanse and there's
A whole slew of
There's
other
a whole
ones. Yeah,
bunch
we don't
of
have to say the
ones.
trade
Yeah.
names in case we get in trouble. Yeah, but all these substances that are readily available. I think you're absolutely right. And actually, that brings me back to something you said in the beginning. Weed, Xanax, other pills, and then opiates. How did you first get Xanax?
First time I got Xanax, my girlfriend at the time was stealing them from her mom, and she said, "You'll love these," and she was right. But
I feel like I talk about benzos every day, and that for most women my age, it's extremely easy to get prescribed a benzo. It really doesn't take much. So I know many people have benzodiazepines in their house. They go down the same neural pathways for some people as alcohol. And so when you're trying to abstain from alcohol, for a lot of people, it can bring a lot of relief. And the withdrawal not only can be dangerous, but it can also be just like brutal, I think, with the anxiety,
Yeah.
depending on how much someone's taking.
yeah.
But
And then it starts that way, and then it's like, all right, your mom ran out of Xanax. We need to, find a street dealer. And then there's stuff that's not, prescribed in there, coming from places we don't know.
I think that part is the really scary part too, just how global the market is now for substances. Not that it wasn't dangerous when it was just domestic, because there's a lot of junk in domestic substances too, but it's really scary that we just don't know. I mean, I know I've worked with many people that order things from Italy, Russia, very interesting, like research chemical benzo type drugs, but it'll be even difficult to test for them. They won't come up on a drug screen as a benzodiazepine, but they'll be reporting like, I was knocked out all weekend. It's actually quite scary. So I'm just curious, like what else you're seeing? It sounds like Adderall or stimulants, prescribed stimulants misused.
I think misuse of just over-the-counter medication too.
Huge. Yeah.
Yeah, like the cough medicine. Yeah, exactly. And
How can one misuse cough medicines? I think some people don't know about that. So how can someone misuse a cough medicine?
I think on the back it says use, X amount, which let's for conversation's sake say 2 to 4 of these. And I believe when you use like 20 of them, you hallucinate.
yeah, people feel those kind of like psychoactive effects, and it's one of those things where once again it's so easily accessible because you go to any convenience store and you can kind of find this stuff, and it feels sometimes easier to be like, oh well, this is just this normal medication, I'm not using drugs.
Very true. Very, very true.
Or I'm just in the medicine cabinet. We already have it. My mom buys it. But it really does kind of become, well, this thing's not working anymore. And then we got to figure something else out. And I think that's really the slippery slope where all of this kind of leads.
I think that accessibility also makes me think of kratom,
Yeah.
which is and I mean, walking home, I'll see 6 shops that'll say, kratom on the front, like they're talking about bubble gum or something.
Yeah. So for those of you that don't know, kratom, it's a plant from Southeast Asia that there are semi-synthetic versions that are being sold. They're banned in Connecticut. It's a scheduled substance in Connecticut, but it is still legal in New York with like some kratom consumer protections in place. But we know that many people I've talked to that are underage have said they've never been carded for buying kratom.
Yeah.
But it acts like a stimulant in low doses, but has opiate properties and binds the same receptors in your brain as opiates. So it can be highly addictive. And we see a lot of people with dependence on it. But I think you're right. Back to accessibility, the cough medicines, vaping.
And then I think there's one last important thing I'd say is when that starts, a lot of times kids don't want to go to their parents because they know they'll get in trouble, or if they get caught the first time they're caught, they're yelled at. And I think as long as it's a conversation to start off with, moving forward, it goes a lot better. So you don't have that, they say, what is it? Connection is the opposite of addiction. And I think a lot of the time that first even, you caught your kid smoking weed, it's not good, but don't make them think they can never tell you if they're doing it, because now we're going to see this pattern of hiding it, and it'll get worse from there.
Yeah, and I know as a parent that it's that reflex of fear, to reactivity, to coming down sometimes really hard, when the truth is we're really terrified and we're really scared. And I think too, something you said before, I think that was one of the most powerful things is what actually sounds like struck you most was like your little brother saying it, and it's like he wasn't yelling at you, he's like he loved you and he was scared. So I think approaching things with that kind of vulnerability that is innate sometimes to younger kids is a good way to start. Well, thank you both so much for the work you're doing. You're both incredibly talented, I know that, and we really appreciate you spearheading this initiative, and thank you for coming on today.
Thanks, Jana,
Thank you. Yeah, this has been great.
for having us.
If you or a loved one is struggling with addiction, Mountainside can help. Call 860-365-6764 to speak with our caring treatment team.